Good afternoon. My name is Yifan Wu. I'm the senior director of events operations here at the Museum of Chinese America. So thank you so much for coming. So in celebration of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Months, we are honored to partner with the New York State Archives Partnership Trust to welcome you to this very special conversation, celebrating two trailblazing Chinese American women, Virginia Kee and May Ying Chen. Today's program will spotlight their groundbreaking contributions from advancing education and social services in Chinatown to championing immigrant rights across New York City. Kee and Chen will reflect on decades of civic engagement and activism and share how personal archives play a vital role in preserving our collective history. So Virginia Kee's story is actually featured in the spring issue of New York Archives magazine in the article Chinese American Women Pioneers, Theodora, Wang, and Virginia Kee, written by MoCA's collection associate, Nancy N. Tang, who is actually in the audience today. And following today's conversation, Yue Ma, MoCA's Director of Collections and Research, will lead behind-the-scene tour of museum's archives. And then if you do enjoy this program, we invite you to upload more upcoming events on our website or social media. And your support is definitely also essential to our institution. It enables us to continue creating programs that uplift communities. And donations can be made on our website, but also we accept cash, credit card, Venmo, and PayPal. So please note that today's program is also being recorded for on-demand viewing after the event. But before we begin, I would like to invite Richard, board member of the Trust, to offer his welcome remarks.
My name is Richard Comstock, and I'm a steward of the New York Archives Partnership Trust. And I like to think of our mission at the Trust as bringing awareness of the New York Archives to the public. And we do that through a number of ways. But the archives really houses 350 plus years of history and is available to you and I if we so desire to find out something about our heritage or about our history, period. How do we make it available to public? Well, we do it through education, preservation, and outreach programs. And one example is the magazine which I have here at the New York Archives, which some copies of which are available, and article of which my new best friend is highlighted in. Virginia is now part of, unfortunately, she's part of my best friend, my best pal list, so she and I are now kindred spirits. Anyway, the Archives Partnership Trust is a very active one. And as I said, we do a lot of not only publications of magazines, but also other educational activities. Today with me are three other people besides myself. Tom Ruller, retired past archivist, New York State archivist. Laura Bierman, and Amy Lee. Amy is the driving force behind today and has done a magnificent job of corralling, herding us cats to get here and be able to give you a presentation. The New York Archives magazine is 25 years old. It's been around for quite a while, and it's designed to be accessible and interesting to the public. Anyone who's interested in New York history and various aspects of it, people, places, and things, and events, I should say. Each issue contains multiple articles on some facet of New York history. A spin-off, or I call it an offspring, of the New York Archives magazine is most interesting, the Archives Junior, which 2 years ago was born of the Archives magazine, and it is designed to reach audiences in grades 4 through 8, generally. And it's distributed right now. We've distributed some on the order of 200,000 copies of Archives Junior. to about 550 schools. So there's a demand that has been built up, and we encourage anyone who's interested to basically ask for copies of Junior so that they can be distributed to their people. The Junior magazine includes one article from the main magazine, and in this quarter, the article that we're going to talk about today is included in Archives Junior. As well as the article, there's also some activities for kids and just age-appropriate things that they might also be interested in learning about. I have to tell you that I'm awed, impressed, in love with this museum. I honestly didn't know a whole lot about it before. I've had some experience in Asia, but I just find this to be fascinating. It's just such an interesting look at the Chinese American experience, and I'm so happy to be here. The article that I mentioned that's in this particular edition is an article about pioneers exploring the legacy of Chinese American women activists. And it is an inspiring article. If you haven't read it, I really would hope that you would. And as I said, even your 4th grade through 8th graders can read it in Archives Junior, which is great. The more I look around at the museum, the more I understand the function and the capabilities and the assets and resources of this museum. I realize that the trust and this museum seem to be well aligned. And I think that I would like to say that this is the beginning of what I would consider to be a lasting friendship, a lasting partnership with the museum. And as they say in the movies, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So with that, I would like to make one other comment. In our audience today, we have a New York State Regent, Brian Christ. And Brian is a valued member of the New York State Regents, which oversees a tremendous amount. I'm not even going to try to tell you all the things he oversees, but I'm going to let him do that and give you just a brief synopsis of Brian and where he fits into the overview of where we are today, where the partnership is, and where the archives are.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Christ, and as I was said, as of March 4th, I was elected as a member of the Board of Regents, where we oversee the State Education Department, but also our state archives, our state museum. We provide organization for every library and museum across the state of New York. And so what we think of, at least what I think of especially in that role, is preserving the idea that is New York. What brought us here or brought our forebears here, and what keeps us here. It's not usually things like the low cost of living and the nice mild summers that keep us here. But there's something that keeps us here and identifies us all as New Yorkers. And that's what I work on in this role. That's why I'm so happy to be here and to see not only one of the museums in this state that I get to visit in my role as regent, but also get to see New Yorkers coming together in honor two incredible New Yorkers who have done so much over this time to preserve that very idea that I work on now. The idea of who we are. And so I'm so happy that we are all here. I am very happy that I was able to come and support this as well. And I'm looking very much forward to hearing more. Even though I know a lot, I am looking forward to hearing even more about the amazing things you two have done. And I'm so grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, since I would also like to invite our MoCA president, Mike Lee, to say a few welcome remarks.
Sorry, I'll keep it very short. Hi, everyone. There's so many new faces here. Thanks to Richard and the Trust for bringing you all here to the museum. I just wanted to introduce myself and say hello. My name is Michael Lee. I'm the president here at the Museum of Chinese in America. I do, in the theme of preservation, do want to shout out our Director of Collections, Yue Ma. And also Nancy for writing the incredible article that we're all here to celebrate today. So thank you, Nancy. Not only do we have the museum down here, what you see here today, detailing the history of Chinese in America, which is much different than the history of folks in China, but also this facility here also houses 80,000 artifacts from the Chinatown area and from nationwide of the Chinese experience here in America. So we're the leading collector of goods across the country. And so we have Yue and Nancy and the hard work of our collections team to thank, but also thank everyone here in the community for that. You know, today we have no better people to be talking about the history of the Chinatown community than Mrs. Kee and May, because, yeah, Mrs. Kee, Virginia Kee, she is basically the mother of Chinatown. We have new faces from the Trust here today, but we also have many of Mrs. Kee's former students today here. Can you raise your hand if you are a former student of Mrs. Kee? So, she's also the founder of Chinese American Planning Council, which I proudly serve on the board of. I not only serve on the board of it, but my father served on the board of it. And Mrs. Kee recruited us both. So when my father served on the board and then he retired, she's like, no, we need to have a Lee still on the board. So she came to me and recruited me. And then when I became the president of MoCA, I didn't even know that we were doing this, but our research team was already writing an article about Mrs. Kee, about the long history that we have here in the archives. And so that's kind of how all this came about. All unrelated, but all due to the impact and work that they have put into the community. And we have no one better than May to tell you, who's been a long time advocate and community organizer here in Chinatown, to talk about their experiences together that they've experienced in this great neighborhood. And so with that, welcome to the Museum of Chinese America. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to May and Mrs. Virginia Kee.
Okay, good afternoon. I want to thank MoCA, Yue, Nancy, Yifan, and Michael for hosting this conversation. I'm really honored to be here with Virginia and talking about her experiences working, serving, advocating, and fighting for this community. And I also want to thank the archives. The magazine story is beautiful. And I have one particular striking memory of seeing one of the sewing machines that survived the Triangle Fire go on display at NYU when we dedicated the memorial. And it was so touching and moving for that, to just think about a machine that went through that history being there on display as we remember the people around that fire. So anyway, I want to start this conversation with Virginia to talk about growing up in Chinatown. I moved to New York Chinatown in 1980 with very young children. And at that time, a lot of my family and friends were saying, oh, this is a dangerous place to be raising your kids, and all kinds of concerns about New York City and whatnot. But I found over the years that this community is actually a very beautiful village for children, in spite of its hardships and difficulties. But Virginia grew up here many decades before that, and I want to ask her to talk about growing up in Chinatown. It was during the Great Depression, but does she have any favorite childhood memories from that time?
Thank you, and it's wonderful to see so many friends. I grew up in Chinatown, and yes, when people ask me, well, whenever I go in, I say, my birthday, 1932. They say, what? 1932? So I am telling you about Chinatown from Depression years to now, and it's very changed. In those days, of course, during Depression, we were all poor. Everybody was poor. My parents didn't have 10 cents to let me have lunch in school. But my mother, who is a very special person, always made us feel special, and we never felt poor. So she would come and bring lunch to us. I would be running around with my sister at PS1, 8 Henry Street, and then we would stop where Mother was sitting, and she gave us the wonton or the soup or the sausage and rice, and we would run around. Our neighbors in this tenement house were all immigrants. We were all poor. But my dad would go into the neighbor's house to help him turn on the lights, turn off the lights. The neighbors were poor, but we all took care of each other. It was a civility and a kindness that we had. My mother was sent to the hospital in an emergency. I was the infant in the crib crying. Finally, the Italian neighbor came over, picked me up, and told my father, "Don't worry, I'll take care of your daughter." So, you know, we didn't have money, but we took care of each other. In those days, my sister and I were home alone all the time. My parents were in the restaurant, 6 Smart Street, Canton Restaurant. Night and day, 24/7, they were working. And my sister and I were always home alone. We set fire to the house, and the neighbor came in and helped put it out. How did we do that? We were roller skating around, and then we dropped the key to the roller skate and kicked it under the couch. We tried to find it. We lit a match. We looked for it, and we set the couch on fire. Then we started to run out to my parents' restaurant a couple of blocks away, and we said, "Mommy, Papa, fortune?" They said, "What? Fortune?" They ran home, and they found that everything was fine because the neighbors came and put it out. So it was hard times, but it was in some ways a beautiful time for people to people.
Yeah. Thanks, Virginia. That's beautiful. If you have the magazine, there's this really amazing picture of Virginia and her sister on a float for China relief during World War II. And it really reflects the solidarity and the community, how close-knit this community was and how well organized. And so I want Virginia to talk about that day. What was living through World War II like? What was the story behind being on this float?
Well,
And, yeah.
During World War II, the Chinese-American community kept trying to raise money because China was being attacked by Japan. At that time, the United States was not involved. It wasn't until after Pearl Harbor. In fact, the United States was selling scrap metal to Japan. So my husband said, as a child, we would be protesting the selling of scrap metal to Japan. And the next week, we will be asking people to give money, and we were always performing, singing, talking on stage, asking the community give money and help the people in China for China relief. And what we found was that no matter what we were doing, that it didn't happen until Japan attacked Pearl Harbor.
So this picture is before 1941. It's in the 1930s.
This picture, we were on a parade. So my sister and I were put on a float, and then we would be asked, that was part of it, up in Fifth Avenue, I think.
Yeah.
And my sister was brilliant. She's older than I am, and she was always having to be on stage because she played the Chinese harpsichord, like that. So she was 8, 9 years old. She was always on stage. And she was so shy, she would never want to be on stage unless I stood next to her and sang. I had a terrible voice, but I sang. And then we managed to raise some money for China.
Well, kids are always irresistible, so it's really a beautiful picture. So after the war, your family moved south for a short time. Why? And tell us about that.
Well, my father and mother had this restaurant at 6 Mott Street, the Canton Restaurant. And after World War II, somehow the economy went down, business was slow. And I think my parents, just like all immigrants, always willing to find another place. Well, it's better in Charlotte, North Carolina. So he picked us all up, and we moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, that was a shock for me because I was in high school. I didn't know anything about segregation. It was in the 1949, and when I got there, I saw that everything was labeled white, color, bathrooms, water fountains, everything. Whenever I got on a bus, I saw that all the Caucasians sat in the front. All the colored people sat in the back.
And where did you go?
I sat in the middle.
Okay.
I didn't want to offend the front, didn't want to offend the back. And for those 2 years that I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, I think was a political education for me. But the other thing that it did teach me was that we really have to fight for our equality, that we cannot tolerate inequality, and segregation made the difference. I did not drink from a water fountain. I didn't use a public bathroom for 2 years while I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. We were not happy. We came back to New York City.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the first time I met you, you were already a teacher.
Yes.
And you had taught at, you taught first in Queens. I didn't know you then, but then you came into Chinatown. Can you talk a little bit about your teaching career?
Well, that was interesting because I majored, I went to school at night because I wanted to go to college. And my parents were poor at that time, and I needed to help them. So what I did was I worked at an office, which was a very nice office. We were selling jade importers. And then I went to Hunter College at night. Hunter College, 68th Street. Jade Corporation, where I was working, on 47th Street to West 47th. That was fine. But when I graduated with a humanities degree, I majored in philosophy and literature. So what was I supposed to do with philosophy and literature? So then I went into teaching. I first found a job at Woodside Junior High School. And at that time, I learned to deal with administration because the principal gave me so many different classes as the first-year teacher. I had a gifted, talented white class. Then I had a gifted, talented black class because it was integrated, but it was not integrated in the school. It was all separate. Then I had a regular class, then I had a special needs class, and then I also was the teacher liaison for the student council. It was interesting because we ran the student council and we elected Alfred Forbes, an Afro-American, to be the president of Woodside Junior High School. I suddenly heard the principal call, "Mrs. Kee," to the main office. So I came down and he said, "Look at this. Some classes just deliver the ballots." I said, "What?" I already announced that Alfred Forbes, the Afro-American, had won the election. So he says, "Well, here are more ballots." So I looked at the principal and I said, "Mr. Van Steenberg, the polls are closed. The polls are closed. When the polls are closed, you cannot vote anymore." So he got on the loudspeaker and said, "Classes that did not deliver their ballots in time, the polls are closed. You cannot do it now." So it taught me that we had to stand up, which I learned to do, even to the administration, even to someone supposedly in a higher rank. So.
Yeah. So you were gutsy from the start. You came back to Chinatown to teach. There was the district, school 65, and then there was a new school, IS 131.
Right.
And how had Chinatown changed, and what was your impression coming back into Chinatown from Woodside?
Well, coming into Chinatown from Woodside, I was shocked because I had a whole class of Chinese. And they were all immigrants.
Right, they didn't speak much English.
Right.
Yeah.
And I found out that as I was teaching them, I changed. My students changed me because they made me stronger. They made me run faster. They made me try to do more. I looked at my students, so bright, so capable, with such energy, and I knew that many of them would not pass the reading test, that they were below third grade reading. And because of that, I said, we have to do something. We have to have a remedial program. And I asked my students, if you had a chance to go to summer school, how many would go to summer school? They all raised their hand. So I felt that as we were progressing in English efficiency, that if we continued this in the summer, at least there would be some chance that they could get by. Otherwise, it would be a failure. So for that reason, you know, sometimes you take a road and you take a different turn. And because of that, your life changes. I think that's what happened to me. I did not intend to go into teaching. I just went in because, all right, fine, I have the... But once I started teaching, it made me fight for CPC, fight for programs, stand up and fight for seniors, and we kept trying to push government to recognize us. And to do that, we had to get into politics. I mean, what good is it if you are agitating and you're independent? We had to be Democrats or in a certain party, so we did. And so today, we are still involved. We still want the recognition. We still want the help that this community needs. The housing for the seniors, the remedial program for the students, and the chance for people to have jobs and to have workforce development.
Yeah, so that was a period of the 1960s when there were so many new immigrants coming from China, Hong
Right.
Kong, and everywhere. And Chinatown, the community really grew and
Right.
developed. And CPC was founded in response to that. And there also was going on in America, the civil rights movement, the war on poverty, and so on. So can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with CPC, which remains to this day one of the most important community service groups with the senior centers, the daycare centers, after-school care, and so on?
Well, CPC was already organized, and it was organized by a group of social workers, someone named Harold Louis. There was also May Ying, Roy Ang, Gloria Chung. They had the organization, and they also had the 501c3. Virginia Kee is writing a proposal. I need a 501c3. So I asked Harold Louis, Harold, can we use the 501c3 from CPC? He says, I don't see why not. We'll go talk to the board. Well, they let us use it. And ever since then, no one really expected that it would be funded, because I felt this is the program we need for our students, our young people in Chinatown. And we put down Chinatown Planning Council, the 501c3, and then, lo and behold, we were funded. After that, we kept moving forward, trying to strengthen our community, trying to get funding. I think that if we didn't write that proposal, maybe we would not be where we are today. So I think that we did it. We used the Chinatown Planning Council, and it became Chinese American Planning Council. And today, there is a new building at 46 Suffolk Street, and it's been 60 years of pushing for programs and to make sure that our community can be stronger, to make sure that our seniors are taken care of, and that our young children have daycare. All of that would not have happened if we didn't put in that first proposal.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And I met you when I was working for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. And I think the real historical flashpoint was in 1982 when there was a strike and a big rally in Columbus Park. And there are pictures of you with the then president of the union, Jay Mazer. I think for me, what was really striking is that in a labor dispute where the Chinese employers were fighting with the Chinese workers, and the union was there trying to defend the benefits and rights of these workers, it was not that easy to get public and strong support from community organizations. And CPC was one of the first and the most staunch and outstanding organizations that came to support the union. And that was important for us because so many of our members relied on the after-school programs and the community services that were provided by CPC as new immigrants. So I want to ask Virginia, why was it important for you to get involved with supporting the union, and how did that happen?
Well, because I was a teacher, and I was a teacher for many years in Chinatown after I was assigned to Chinatown. I had like a certain recognition in the community. And I felt it was very important that we did unionize the garment workers in our community, because with a union, you get more benefits. And with a union, you will be able to expand and learn, and they would provide health benefits and different benefits. I, myself, I am a union member with
Teachers union.
UFT.
Right.
So I would normally want to support.
Yeah. And I think it played a big role in giving the women workers a voice, because in Chinatown, a lot of the traditional organizations would never allow the women to be, in the an officer or anything like that. So women were supposed to stay home and take care of the household and family. But really, the garment workers were out there working pretty long hours and,
Right.
Providing the health care benefits and supports for their families. And so both the strike and after the strike, working between the union and the community groups like CPC, we were able to really bring out the voice and leadership of some of these immigrant women in the community. So, and Virginia was really an important role model in that, I would say. And to segue from that into politics, we did a lot of joint, like, voter registration and political activities. And, maybe you can talk a little bit about your political engagement.
Well, politics is very important. When you look on TV, the presidential conventions, and you look at the Democratic presidential conventions, you see all kinds of people as delegates. I found that when I won as Democratic State Committee woman, that I could insert into the rules and regulations of the procedure for presidential nomination, I could insert the words Asian American, Pacific American delegates, that we had to have delegates who were from Pacific Asian Americans. I was able to do this because I was at this meeting. I didn't know how to do it, and I ran to someone, Shirley Chisholm, and I said, "Congresswoman, tell me how to do this. I really think that Asian Pacific Americans should be delegates too." She says, "Well, go over there, talk to Paul Tips, the person who is in charge. He is the president of the Ohio Democrats. He'll take care of it." And so today, this is like 1978, today, 2025, we have it in there. We don't know how it got there. Someone did it for us. And that's why, for each of us, we have to take ourselves that there is a role for us to play to make this world better. We can do it, each individual.
Right, you're a great example for that.
Question and answer.
Yeah. Should we move into, are there questions? Yeah.
Yifan, should we have question and answer?
Okay, yeah, let me ask you one more question, and then
Okay.
we'll hear from the audience. Yeah, in the political realm, I always admired you because you went to these big conventions and meetings where you were probably one of very few Chinese or Asians there. And you talk about working with Shirley Chisholm and, finding other allies in that arena. So how do you compare working in those kind of arenas with being in Chinatown, where everybody is Chinese and we have our own, eccentricities about how to get messages across? But how do you compare working between the two worlds?
Well, in our own community, we're not always united. I had a lot of trouble when I wanted help for the young people, because according to some elders, I disgraced the Chinese by mentioning that we have problems. I said, we do have problems. There's white eagle, black eagle, golden dragon. These were gangs in those days. But they said, you disgrace the Chinese by saying that there are problems. So in some ways, when we are outside with like-minded people, like I work with Bella Abzug and Shirley Chisholm, so sometimes it's even easier if you would get the support of progressive people in the Democratic Party at that time. The reason why it's Democrat is because I found out that all the voters in New York City, out of 10 voters, 8 of them are Democrats. So I'm saying to myself, why should I be in another party? Because it will not be so easy to get elected. Are there any questions?
So if you like to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand and the microphone to you.
You already mentioned how there's a lack of unity nowadays among the Chinese community because it's divided by dialect, by where they came from in China, by generation, and so on and so forth. Now, with the federal government doing all these cutbacks, do you think that will bring the community closer together to unite, or do you think it will fragment it more as everybody tries to fight for a crumb?
Mayor, you want to answer that? I don't think it's going to unite us more, because even with everything that's happening, I think what is, unless, of course, people really thought about it. In these terrible times, there's still people who think this is great for America.
I guess I'll give the more optimistic answer, but it's not an optimistic time. I think that, people have to get together, because I think a lot of our institutions and community groups are being harmed by a lot of the cutbacks and attacks. A lot of the anti-Asian, the tariffs, and it's like the whole world seems to be caving in on us. And so I think that we need a new young generation of leaders. I think Michael is a good example to start to step up and be like Virginia Kee, channel that sense of resoluteness and not giving up, and organizing. From my own experience, the organizing that the union did, in spite of all these differences, which are many, many differences, the union really knew that it could only be strong if we were united and if we tried to find the common things that would bring people together. So I think, especially in the spirit this month of Asian heritage, we all need to think about that more, encourage the new leaders, learn from the history and oral history, and just try to pull ourselves together and move forward. So I think the other thing we didn't talk about that was mentioned by Yifang and Michael was, why is oral history important? I mean, why should we have archives and magazines and, I had this talk with my son because he was very skeptical about why do you always, work with these crusty old libraries and papers, and what's the point? So I'd like to have Virginia maybe talk about why she did the interview and, why is the oral history important?
Well, Yifan noticed that in all the years, whenever they asked me for an interview, I always accept it. My feeling is that we are here, and if there's no record that we built the railroads or that we did work and fight in World War I, World War II, and we gave blood here or if there's no record, we didn't do it. Nobody knows that we did anything. So I feel that the record keeping is very important, and it shows we were here, we did what we could to help this country, and that's what we should be doing.
Any other questions, comments, suggestions?
Virginia, I saw a documentary from WNBC. It was a news report. It was 1965, and I want to thank you as other children that benefited. You guys helped me do my homework. So I wouldn't be here today without the organization, so thank you.
I am so touched today because I found that here we have some of my former students from 1970 came, and I said, that was so touching. And they reminded me that I said, everybody has to get their working papers, everybody has to do this. And we said, we took them down and got SYEP. They learned that they could get a job, and they learned that they could. One of the things when I was teaching, it was not so much about remembering exactly the Paul Revere ride or this or that. I wanted to make sure that the immigrant students felt at home in America. That what was important was that they built the confidence within themselves, because without that confidence, you're in a new country, you are scared, you don't know language, you are way behind, you're on the bottom of the rack when you go to school. If you feel confident, if you look in the program, you will see that I'm with a group of students walking around the neighborhood, showing them this is the police department, this is the fire department, this is the library, this is where you should get a library card, and make them feel like it's important. I also taught them survival skills, that if they needed to call 911, the first thing you say, if they ask you, what happened, what's wrong, don't describe anything. Just say, heart attack, heart attack. So I said,
Get to the point.
yeah. Follow me. I said, heart attack. And they said, heart attack. So then people would come immediately. So, I feel that sometimes life is very strange, that you're going along, and I didn't expect to be a teacher. I fell into the profession. I became a teacher. I came to Chinatown, and with that, I had to do something. I had to push CPC. CPC had to grow. My students had to get better. My community had to grow stronger. All these things only because I became a teacher.
Well, I am one of those students. Back in 1970, you know.
Come forward.
Stand up, stand up.
Stand up and use the mic.
Is this on? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, I am one of those students. I am so glad that you became a teacher, and not just a teacher, but an advocate, because being here as an immigrant, not having any role models, not knowing anyone, you know, and I was in that third grade level of reading English, you know, in 7th grade. So I didn't realize that you were the one organizing it all, but, you know, you got us all going for summer school. I don't know how easy it is today, you know, to do that, but you did that, and one of the first things she did was not just teaching us English, you know, getting us into classes, but what else is needed for these kids, you know? And that was, well, who's 14 years old, you know? Who doesn't have a social security card, you know? So I was like, well, you're not 14 yet, but we'll wait for you, you know what I mean? So she rounded us all up, got us down to get social security cards, got us working papers, you know, got us a job. And I was telling Virginia earlier that I was the first one in my family to have a paycheck with my name on it, you know? Because my mother was getting, you know how in the factories they were getting paid in cash or in envelopes, you know, and all that. So everyone in my family was like, let me see that. Is that really a check, you know? So, and, you know, and because of that, I moved on to 9th grade level English. By 8th grade, it was over my head, you know, but because of that, and then through the CPC and all of that, I had summer jobs, you know, throughout. And, you know, so it was all because of you that we have this going. And I tell Virginia that $117 for that summer is on my Social Security work history. It's my first job. So thank you so much.
I have one last question that was on my paper for Virginia, and it's very relevant because Sunday is Mother's Day, and they wanted Virginia to talk about her mom. So can you do that?
My mom was an incredible woman. She was lovely, very soft, quiet, but she had a rod of steel inside. She was very strong. Can you imagine a woman who married somebody in China? For 8 years, she didn't hear from her husband because he went to the United States, and if he wrote a letter, he only wrote it to his parents. And she was wondering, what is happening? Where am I? And my mother was an orphan because her father went to Australia. Her mother was home with her as a girl, and she had no one. The mother died, the father was away, and my mother said to herself, this is repeating the same thing. I am home with my in-laws, and my husband is in the United States. So someone was looking for a nanny to come to the United States because he worked with a consulate and he needed to come and he needed a nanny. So my mother decided she would come. She found her husband. He had married a Caucasian woman and they already had 4 children. So my mother said he would never give up his 4 children. So they signed a Chinese divorce. You know, she signed and with a stamp, and he signed with a stamp. So they were divorced. So my mother decided to stay in New York and to work. And that's how she met my father. And we said, Mom, why did you marry Daddy? She said, well, he spoke English. And I could never understand that.
That's a great story.
Can I ask one last question?
Yeah.
So Virginia being the mother of Chinatown, as I said before, and putting so much love and care into this neighborhood, the people here, the Chinese community in New York City, what do you think this neighborhood and its people's impact is on the city and, you know, maybe just greater society?
Well, you know, I think that we're at a period where we are changing. You know, we have more elected officials that are Asian Americans. We are changing in that maybe it is the right thing to have someone is supporting this candidate, someone is supporting that candidate. There's a lot of running around with different candidates and different so-called community leaders. But I think what we need to do is really coalesce and unite and work for the good of the community. What we need, whether it's housing for the elderly, whether it's programs for the young people, whatever it is, we should all try to work together. I don't know whether it's going to happen in this generation or we have to wait till another generation. Sorry.
I know. Well, I mean, I think the community is much more diverse than it ever was. And I think the next generation is much more well-educated than the past generations. But I think they maybe sometimes lack a touch with the grassroots and an ability to really organize and get everybody on the same page. And so I think that if that can happen, we are much more visible in New York City than when I first came. I was shocked when I first came to New York City because this is the biggest Chinatown in the country, but this is also the biggest city in the country, and the Chinese seem to be so isolated and misunderstood. I think now we do have people writing more in English, and there seems to be a better awareness, at least of Chinese food, but also hopefully of our community and our culture and, you know, some of those things. So we just need to hope that in the new generation of leaders, we have organizers, being from a union background, I believe strongly in the need to not just organize on social media, but organize really by talking to people and getting people together as we are today. So I thank MoCA for having this meeting and Virginia for being such a great role model for all of us.
Yeah, can we give a round of applause? Yeah, to our wonderful speakers. Yeah, Virginia Kee. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, so after the talk, you know, we'll have a kind of a behind-the-scene tour of our collections. You know, that's on the second floor. So we will take a 5-minute break. If you need to use the restroom, they are downstairs. But then we'll get it back. We can just wait in the lobby, and then we will bring you upstairs. We'll also have an elevator if you need that access. Yeah. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming, and then please check out our upcoming programs this month. Thank you so much.